Hi, I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, and welcome to the big XR news show in September. We've got a lot of subjects to chat about here, but I'm really proud to introduce Jennifer Rogers, Letitia Bouchard, Jay Latta, and Kevin O'Donovan, for this latest iteration of the show. One of the biggest events of the year in terms of XR, at least from a commercial and mainstream audience point of view, is happening next week as of recording, which will be MetaConnect 2024. At that event, there's going to be two key device announcements based off rumours and certain information circulating, being an MR headset, a lighter rendition of the Meta Quest 3S, and a pair of, quote, groundbreaking AR smart glasses, according to the CTO of the company. But just to kick us off, Jay, why don't you kick us off with this first question? I'd love to hear some more of the all the other panelists' point of view too. Could you give us your perspective on the Meta Quest S3? One point I'm interested in hearing about is their evolution from Quest Pro, Quest 3 to Quest 3S, the lighter version. So what's your perception on that roadmap, on that journey, and what do you think the future holds for MR with Meta?
Rory, thank you. You know, I'm one of the biggest Meta fans that ever has been crawling on this planet. So what am I expecting? More or less a copy of parameters that have been out there from several other competitors. Sure, of course, this overall evolution is interesting from the pure product perspective. What we are still missing is what to do with it. That it's being made higher resolution, that it's being made more mobile, that it's being made lightweighted, and so on and so on. All of these things are honestly nothing worth to discuss. This should be somehow intrinsic. Still, one of the biggest issues that I have here is data intransparency. So what is exactly happening with all of these sensors inside? What are the goals from Meta and so on and so on? I mean, we all have some kind of assumptions. It will be interesting. I will, of course, look into it. Maybe I will even test it out. Honestly, groundbreaking, yeah. Everything is so super groundbreaking, once of its kind, and so on. All of these guys cook with the same water. So curious, not expecting anything really groundbreaking.
Letitia, I would like to just jump in there and hear your side of it, because I know you have experience using MetaQuest and some enterprise perspectives when we've had previous chats. So what are your thoughts on the new MR headset? And then also those reflections of perhaps where the Quest Pro didn't quite hit an enterprise as well. Is there any reflections there?
Well, I guess the main focus would be on the wearing aspect, the ergonomy. For me, that's the number one priority now, is to have something that doesn't look as cluttered as it is now, although it has already massively improved. But still, we, especially for instance, for the therapeutics, we would need to have very plug and play, easy to use, comfortable headsets. For instance, right now, even with the Quest 3, if you don't have that special, how is it called again, Jay? You know that. The extra battery. Yeah, exactly. Then it falls off. It's not comfy. And I hope that, and even the AVP, really, I mean, I don't feel it's more ergonomic than the Meta, right, to your point, Jay. And I think it's just as heavy and bulky. So really, we need a more convenient headset that could also be placed on smaller heads. For instance, young children, since it's PG-13, a VR headset. At 13, you have a huge discrepancy of sizes. And I would still go for, a lighter version and perhaps but a bigger full field of view, so it's difficult to have it all, right?
Definitely. And Jennifer, Kevin, I don't know if you have any other points because I'd like to go back to the form factor piece after I hear your opinion.
Yeah, I was going to mention something related to the ergonomics and form factor, particularly as we speak about MR. Right. And obviously, I'm coming at this, as I usually do, from more of an industrial perspective, and particularly in a lot of the environments that we're looking to really leverage MR in the field. Those environments, as I've talked about before, right, are outside, concerns around light, dust, wearability, particularly with regards to additional PPE that people would have to be wearing. I'm not sure that this announcement is going to solve for any of those pieces, and of course that's concern for all of us from the perspective of the industrial space, whereby we're really trying to create this connected worker type of environment where we can really kind of augment operators' work in the workplace. So I'm curious to see, but that said, there's a lot of considerations around the hardware itself and the ways in which it would need to accommodate the kind of work that happens out in the field. I'm sure Kevin has some thoughts around that too.
Well, so I'll probably take it a different direction. And if you look at what we all just mentioned there, they are all extremely valid concerns, issues. To Jay's point, it's like, well, what's going to be earth-shattering? It's iterations, right? Even if there's the next generation of the Qualcomm chip, which comes out in whatever, next year or the year after, like that'll be better again. But we'll all kind of look at it and go, ho hum, right? We just expect that. So a couple of different things. I don't think anyone's going to bring out any device anytime soon that's going to solve world peace and hunger and keep everyone happy. What I think is fascinating is, given the current technology, the architecture, the headsets are the size they are, right? It's either a trade-off. Letitia, if you want greater field of vision, you're going to have a bigger headset because you need more power and blah, blah, blah. So there's a trade-off, and the battery, and. That'll get better over time, but that's not going to change overnight. So if you're going to be wearing a VR headset, that's what you've got. And the concerns around head size and whatever, totally valid, but it is what it is. I don't think anyone's going to bring out bringing out the best headset with the best technology. We've seen that with the Vision Pro. That doesn't certainly mean that everyone just buys one, right? That's not the killer. I think the killer is getting more people to start using this stuff. And I think the killer is actually mixed reality and augmented reality. Get it into more people's hands, more common consumers. People kind of go, oh, this is cool. I didn't know you could do that. And then to Jennifer's point, like we saw with iPads, like we saw with laptops, like we saw whatever, people use it in their daily lives. The kids use it. And then they go back into the enterprise and say, why can't we use something like that in our job? Now, that does not get away from the fact, I'm here in Houston meeting with Jennifer this week at Gas Tech. If you're in the oil and gas industry, you can't just put one of these on and walk out into a wind farm or a substation or an oil platform, right? Not going to happen. But if they start going, I can use this at home, this would be really handy in work, can we get a solution? That's where it kind of plays in. Now, my final point would be, I'm not sure anything Meta will announce next week will get over the fact that in most enterprises, having a Meta account or a Facebook account to access your device is kind of like, don't really think. I think their angle is, the more they can get people to use it in general public, more use cases, easy, simple, quick, cheap, that will drive adoption or pull factor into enterprises over time. But so it's good for what they're doing. I think it's interesting as well that they got rid of Spark, because that was built for mobile phones. And I know there's a lot of people pulling their hair out and they've, it's bad for their business and. But where they're headed is they're going, we need something that we can design once, run on multiple devices. So that's interesting.
Two additional points. Sorry for hopping in. Letitia mostly talked about healthcare use cases. This is an additional very important thing, because in XR environments, you are getting informations about interactions. So from the data security, from your privacy, this is an increase. It's not just about having a Meta account in a corporate. Here as well, extremely sensitive informations might be collected. So the trust, especially in healthcare, if it's a training for nurses, if it's a psychotherapy use case, yada, yada, would be even more monitored. So this is the first thought. The second thought, thank you for Kevin for bringing this up. It's about the adoption. The adoption has to come from the people. We are on the same misleading way like with AI. All of the AI metric that you see is utter bullshit because it's being used against the humans. Any kind of algorithm, any kind of workflow automation, everything is just being pressed into making the people more efficient or more trackable, means against us. Here, the biggest value, and I hope that with Apple Intelligence, we will see something going into the right direction, that AI should stay local. AI, like XR, needs to become your personal tool set because you are the only one. If you to know if you prefer a brand XYZ, if you want to dock into whatever ecosystem you are in, if you have created your virtual, let's say, digital twin of your ideal office and so on, you are the only one that knows if you want to be on a moon surface or in Austin or on vacation beach, yada, yada, whatever. So this personal usage, this theme-based thing where I can define how I use it, in what environment I feel the best. This is the most important part, how these technologies could be adopted, because then you are simply in your home office, in your environment, but you take it with you into your real office, into your digital twin of Siemens, ExxonMobil, whatever. And same here is the correlation with AI. AI will help us to define these spaces. And AI needs to be local, needs to be yours, because this is the only way how we can, as humans, get the freedom back and helping all of these workflows, all of the visualizations, adapt on our own needs. If you have, let's say, a tailored workflow with yada yada visualization, no one gives a damn if you, let's say, have a green, red issues to see. No one gives a damn. You are the only one who knows it. Or if you have macular degeneration or any other issue, so that you simply don't see like the industrial designer who designed this nonsense. So this individualization through XR, through AI, is the thing that will really boost any kind of adoption in our workplace.
But just to go back onto the note on adoption, create and Spark, the Spark platform, and then the form factor. The parallel story to the MR headset is the AR smart glasses that Meta are going to again showcase after they've showcased it last year and the year previous, I believe, as well. There's no real point, I think, speculating around the device itself. What's more interesting, I think, is perhaps that push towards adoption via that smaller form factor device. Meta, via their Ray-Ban stories, have had self-proclaimed sales success. I don't know how trustworthy some of those are, because I think it's coming a lot from internal, but perhaps that AR smart glasses is going to be the aid to this adoption that MR headsets may not get, at least at this point with the form factor. So perhaps, Kevin, you spoke about the Spark AR platform shutting down. They're going to be remaking that platform more based on new devices and smart glasses as well. But what are your thoughts on smart glasses in terms of adoption, enterprise and consumer wise? Because they do offer a different, perhaps more accessible solution, if that's fair to say.
They do, but I suppose, and Jay hit it on it as well, and Jennifer will know in whatever everybody knows in the industry side. It's not just about the technology and the art of the possible. It's how do I integrate it into my existing workflow and my existing systems. Now, the easiest place you can get adoption is in consumer apps, because we now live in a world where I update the app on my phone or it updates automatically 24/7. right? I get a new feature or I get a new thing. So I can suddenly download an app, put on my new headset that I just bought or got given, and I can measure my room, right? It's very quick. If I try and do that in an enterprise environment, there's all sorts of security and whatever. And the other thing is, let's face it, I particularly live in, look at all the cool stuff that's coming and what you can do. Most companies are operating on technology today for their core systems that they built 10 years ago. And their upgrades will get them to 3 or 4 years behind in a couple of years, right? That's just the way it is. So back to Jay's point, the screens were designed with, traffic lights, yellow, green, red, right? And then you add all the IoT devices, and then suddenly you have thousands of yellow and green lights coming at you, and you're like, you don't know, like, which one do I pick? So I think if they come out with something quick, simple, and people go, this is very useful, and I don't have the backlash against Google Glass and then adoption kind of goes, this is interesting. Why can't I use that and work? And then there'll be all sorts of reasons. But that, I was around when the iPad came out. We said you can't use that and work. That'll never work. And we saw what happened there, right? Because people demanded it. The CEO walked into the IT department and said, I want this. Oh, it's not supported in our policies. Well, it will be tomorrow, or else I'll get somebody who will make it supported in our policies. and away you go, right? So I think it's got to get that critical mass in consumer land, and then it becomes interesting in enterprise land. But it's going to be we have plenty of use cases, but it's how do you integrate it with the existing workflow? That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, and IT infrastructures as well, I imagine there's another point. Especially when you've got healthcare, etc., and other factors other sectors that use legacy devices from 20 plus years.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of regulation. You've got healthcare regulation, you've got the medical records. Does data go off-site? Does it stay local? If you're in the energy industry, it's a security asset or a national security asset. You have all sorts of security regulations. Oh, what do you mean you're using glasses that were built in Germany? Oh, it might be a security risk, right? Not mind China or God knows where. So there's all sorts of fun and games. But hey, look, we'll see what they come out with. But I do think it's about getting this stuff into more people's hands. People going, oh, this is clever. I wonder, could I use this in work?
One additional thought on this. Younger generations, they use technology in a different way. I mean, I grew up with this here, right? I mean, the youngsters are talking like this. I mean, it's annoying, of course, but it makes sometimes sense. So it's the same like using game controllers on a submarine. It's simply something that the younger generation are used to. They do not need to relearn everything like the older farts. When you need to push several buttons, then you have this kind of clumsy whatever. This is simply 1980s. The mindset, how our companies are structured, they need to catch up from time to time to adapt not just on the next level of consumers, but also to the next level of employees. And here, with LLMs, not a fan of it, with all the additional gadgets that we have, it's the younger generations that are demanding this, because this is what they have at home. This is what they know how to deal with. They do not want to boot up MS-DOS 6.22 and then start Microsoft Windows 3.11. No. I mean, in healthcare, there are some systems that still run this crap. So if you have a Gen Z admin, he would simply pee into his trousers because he never seen this.
Fantastic. And Letitia, Jennifer, I don't know if you had any more thoughts about how smart glasses, how a more mainstream approach to smart glasses could help adoption, especially in terms of consumer apps, or a killer use case, for use of better words, that perhaps bring this in. And Letitia, one more point about healthcare, actually, which I think is quite important to note, is perhaps a hygiene side of things, where you got devices that attach to people's faces. What is that hurdle like? And is that something that might be pushing headsets out of healthcare, or is that something that's solved?
No, because in a medical surrounding, everything is being taken care of. And last week I was operating 3-day festivals event where you had a very broad public coming in, and I was very adamant on cleaning every time, and people were actually surprised that I would do so. They've a bit forgotten about these bad COVID times, and actually I walked off thinking that I had caught COVID again. So but no, actually I think that in the clinical setting, it's all taken care of, especially in the rehab. We have more and more rehab. Well, in the hospitals, we have these rehab sections that use VR. Those are the first ones, right? And they're super, super careful with the cleaning. And that's part of every nurse and doctor's regular process: hand washing, cleaning. So it's just part of the hospital environment, really.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I know this is kind of what everyone's been saying, right? But we've become so enamored with the hardware, right? That sometimes we're disconnecting from the actual things that we do know around what people are looking to do and the ways in which technology can augment that experience for them, right? Whether it's a consumer application or it's a commercial application, right? We know what people are looking for with regards to that experience. They're looking for something that connects with who they are as a person. They're looking for something that augments a skill set and or a capability that they don't have without the device. There's all these different pieces that you can plug into to kind of look at and test the technology against. Does it actually advance the human experience or not? Does it give human beings an ability to do something that they want to do? I think that's the first thing. And do so in a way in which reduces friction, reduces barriers to entry, makes it more enjoyable. There's a bunch of different things that you could list off with regards to that. Until we can really connect into that human experience more, as everyone else has said, continuing to iterate upon the hardware and the form factor and all of those kinds of things is not necessarily going to get us to where we need to be from an adoption standpoint. Our consumers are pretty sophisticated at this point with regards to what it is that they're expecting from technology and the ways in which it actually improves their lives. Until we can get to the use cases associated with all of these devices that actually do improve lives and that people understand, help them to do that, we're going to continue to have issues with adoption. So, I think Kevin's point from earlier is well taken in the sense that, like iPads and some of the other pieces of technology that predate this era today, yes, consumers were able to connect with that and say, this actually helps me to do something that I want to do, and then take that, in our cases, into the enterprise and say, can we figure out a way to make this happen? I'm not sure we're quite there yet with regards to some of this technology, whereby people can see that and inherently A, connect with it from a consumer perspective, but then B, legitimately bring it into the enterprise and say, I have a suggestion, I have a use case, this is a way in which we can take this technology and utilize it. And so I think that's kind of the place that we find ourselves in right now. And like I said, I think it's somewhat frustrating in the sense that there have been lots of great pieces that have been published around, like even Operator 4.0, which came out of a great European Horizons project in 2020, where they kind of already identified the personas, if you will, with regards to operators in particular in the manufacturing space and what types of personas would be required, right? That's already out there. There's lots of other great work that's out there too. It's just, once again, getting a little less enamored with the hardware and more connected to the human experience and the ways in which we need to, utilize that hardware to bring about the outcomes that people are expecting.
We call this human centricity. This is something that slowly starts to be understood. So means with all of these technical capabilities that we have, with this supercompute power in your pocket, when technology is able to adapt on the human needs, so putting the human into the center. The thing is that still, how I've said before, our companies are stuck in the 1980s. They are not really ruled by the CEO, they are ruled mostly by the CFO. So the guy who sits like the dragon on the budget. And when you come around with a new cool thingsy, then his first question is, where is the fucking ROI? Exactly, Kevin. And I mean, you cannot really, for some things, you cannot describe an ROI. This is an outdated and extremely toxic thinking. Because what is the ROI of a smoother surface where you feel comfortable with it? You cannot quantify it like, okay, more people will buy it or more people will more likely use it. It's simply a feeling that you would like to have it. But how should you frame it into, maybe this device costs $200 more, then the CFO starts to tell you, $200 more means 100,000 FTEs that we have. This means this and that much more we have to spend, and we have to less spend for our shareholders. So, the overall dynamics needs to change. It's from the younger generations, it's this human centricity, and finally, we see, especially right now, focus on Germany, Volkswagen completely falling down. When I have one client from an evil state that told me, okay, we put everything on hold because we simply wait until Volkswagen collapses and we buy it then for an Apple. Not company Apple, but for Apple, eating Apple. And it's simply, it needs to change in the meaning of being stakeholder oriented and not shareholder oriented. When it's really not anymore about the fucking money, right?
Yeah, but in the ideal world, I'd agree with you, Jay. But I will give business leaders some bit of slack. There are so many moving pieces right now. Geopolitics, lack of skilled workers, need to keep the guys and girls I have. I need the new generation coming in. How do I keep up with AI? How do I maintain competitiveness in my company versus other companies, Europe versus the US versus China, whatever? There is so much going on. And I agree with you that the CFO, and to be quite honest, in the 30 years I've been running around selling new technologies, there was always someone going, hang on a second, how much is this going to cost and what are we going to get, right? So you have to pass the red face test, unless somebody decides that I don't care, I just want it, which can happen as well, rarely. But cut a long story short, I think, and we'll probably come on to it later around use cases and virtual worlds and whatever, training is killing people, not killing, excuse me, wrong word, but how do I get upskill, new generation, whatever? And I think that's kind of the low-hanging fruit right now. And the ROI is that I just need to get people. And can VR, XR, MR help in that? And I think that's kind of they don't want to know about the technology, but it's like, how can this help me fix this problem? Explain to me. Now I'll talk to you. But it's complicated. Anyway, enough.
It is complicated. And the one thing I'll say about that, because, I feel like training has been one of the top use cases that we hear about, at least for XR, for a long time. And, I know I've talked about this in other sessions that we've recorded and everything else. The most frustrating thing about all of that, though, to your point, Kevin, is that there's no meaningful ROI or metrics that are being captured in that training either, right? It's just kind of like, okay, an individual went through this immersive experience, and thus we're going to infer that because they liked it and they thought it was fun, that we built more skill than we would have in some other modality in the training space. And, this is where, obviously I'll jump in again and say we have data standards to support actually measuring the ways that behavior is shaped or changed in any experience, but particularly in an immersive experience. And where we struggle from, and I'm speaking from an IEEE perspective right now, is that those are open and freely available standards. And yet, though I see many tech and solution providers jumping into the training use case in XR, they are not utilizing any of those standards to actually demonstrate an ROI associated with training, right? My concern about that is where we end up in that scenario is that we use proxy metrics that were created for learning management systems, which came about at the dawn of the internet, right? And we use those same measurement schemes for some of these immersive experiences, which is absolutely inappropriate and does not demonstrate any ROI. That's why a lot of our colleagues in HR and learning and development and all of those pieces have always struggled with budgets, with convincing the CFO, all of those particular pieces. And so I think that there's lots to be done, and certainly upskilling is a huge piece of it. That said, we need people to apply the right rigor to those types of use cases and applications to show that we actually are upskilling people in a more efficient and effective way than we would have with any other modality. I think that's one of the challenges that we still face. And that comes with challenges as well around, if you're using those data standards, how are you doing that in a way where you maintain trustworthiness, where you deal with all of the issues around personal data? Those are all things that we're all still working to solve for, and in many cases have standards for as well. But when people get really excited about adopting certain use cases and they don't have the discipline to actually bring about those standards while they're developing the tech, that's where we start to maybe not take advantage fully of the use case and the ways in which it can demonstrate ROI, to Jay's point that he made earlier.
And I could add to that and to Jay's comment before as well about the youth. Here in Switzerland, we have a very strong apprenticeship program, so vocational training. And big firms, big companies tend to have less and less success at attracting young people to onboard them in these companies. And what I always tell them is the novelty aspect, the attractive use cases and technological training that you might give to them and help them acquire could be an edge, an added value for your company, because you're training them to tools that others wouldn't or couldn't. And so I always encourage them to embrace new technologies, not only for improved in-house processes, but also for the workforce and for being attractive in the work, in the workspace.
Fantastic. And just to continue on with this human-centric approach to approach to this discussion right now, I really wanted to discuss immersive collaboration use cases. I think that's a great point to continue on from the human-centric approach. I'm very much curious in three different ways immersive collaboration is really coming out. One which is in-person immersive collaboration, remote or on the field immersive collaboration, and then also immersive collaboration within or around fully virtual environments. But I just wanted to touch on the field operation and hands-free instructing. And just Letitia and Jennifer, from your perspectives from healthcare and from the AVP points you mentioned earlier, Letitia, and then also Jennifer from the industrial point of view, these AR smart glasses use cases, hands-free immersive training or collaboration use cases, instructional, upskilling, obviously are in their early days, but we're hitting the middle of the decade, and forecasts for these technologies, at least from market analysts, are saying that it's going to uptick massively in terms of adoption into 2030, excuse me. So I guess from your current perspective, how do those optics compare to your reality and what you've actually seen in terms of on the field instructing, collaborating and training, upskilling, etc.? And Jay, Kevin, it'd be great to hear your perspectives as well.
Sure. So from a field operator perspective, I do think that there's incredible opportunity with regards to connected worker, particularly heads-up displays, the ways in which we handle remote operations or over-the-shoulder types of digital coaching and guidance. All of those pieces are amazing in terms of opportunity. Kevin mentioned before, we have a huge need to upskill, and we can't do that in the ways in which we've done before. It's just slow, expensive, and inefficient, right? So we need ways to make that happen. When you look at organizations, however, and their readiness to start to make that transition at scale, and I'm going to say that because it's important, at scale, there are so many other pieces that need to happen to enable that, right? So if we're talking about, you know, instruction via device and those kinds of things, okay, that's definitely easy for an organization to put in place from a pilot perspective. You know, you can gather schematics, SOPs, different relevant pieces of information, and make sure that those can be served up to an operator in the field. You can also connect them with real-time experts who can see what they see and give them guidance. All of that is brilliant. Where I see organizations still struggling a bit, though, is around the scale piece. Because, you know, even if you can get all of those devices and get them, in some cases, you know, to a place where you're procuring zone rated equipment that can go out into the field, you have it connected and it's not in any way drawing from bandwidth that's required for operations on site. You know, assuming all of that is set up and working from an integration technology perspective and everything else, organizations still have to have some kind of content management or ability to serve up those pieces of information at the right time. And that's where I see that organizations are really starting to move in that direction, but maybe don't have everything set up inherently to scale that. And what I mean by that is, yes, we can pull a few SOPs, standard operating procedures that maybe we had in PDF before in a SharePoint site, right? And load those up to, you know, a portal whereby it can serve up that information or what have you for the purposes of a pilot. But when we need to have that dynamic in a space in which the content is already digital and can easily be pushed to the right person at the right time with the right environmental trigger or individual trigger that, you know, that says that the person needs that, organizations are still struggling with regards to even getting that content in a digital format that can actually interact in that way. So there's lots of dependencies. I think Kevin said this before, you know, dependencies and integrations that are difficult for organizations and enterprise right now. I think they're starting to make those moves. Perhaps some of these use cases are helping to add the justification that allows them to do that. But that said, it's a journey, right? In terms of being able to really fully utilize a lot of this technology for the use cases and the opportunity that comes with it.
Fantastic. And Letitia, I don't know if you had any points on immersive upskilling, instruction, training from a healthcare point of view on, you know, in terms of AR smart glasses, etc.
Yes, I guess it has more to do with the content and also the regulations. For me, as long as there is no FDA approval of this device, the content may be as groundbreaking and innovative and awe-inspiring as any, it won't make the cut because it won't be taken seriously on the other side. So really what we aim for here with most of the top-notch developments is to file for approval by the regulatory bodies, be it in Europe or Switzerland. You know, we all have our own regulations. So I know the FDA in the US has already approved a few solutions, and we are trying to, you know, to piggyback on that here in Europe as well. Otherwise, we might lose the momentum. And also, I don't know where China is currently on this specific topic, but imagine if China is giving a go to such device, then we're going to be flooded with American and Chinese devices. I have nothing against it, but it's just that we won't be able to make our own content be as powerful and impactful as the others. So that's where we are right now, I would say.
It's interesting that you mentioned the regulatory piece. I think that's really brilliant as we start to think about this, Letitia. And I find that somewhat interesting because I think it depends on the industry, right? When we look at the industrial space and everything else, I hear lots of great conversations that make me very encouraged, whereby industry saying, if we can get our acts together and we can create this environment that is safer, that is more productive, more sustainable, all of these pieces, we avoid regulation being placed upon us. So, I mean, when I hear those things, it's exciting, right? Because it's the community coming together and saying, we recognize that there's opportunity here and we can proactively put something into place that maybe doesn't mean that a regulation comes down upon us that we weren't a part of and that, you know, is going to make it harder for us to operate. So it's interesting how it plays, I think, in both sides of the spectrum. But in lots of ways, in both instances. So I think that's interesting.
And here really it's typical of our bearish mentality, you know, and not bullish like in the US. We're waiting to see what has been accepted elsewhere before doing the same. Plus, Jay is yeah, well, he knows what I mean. And also, we do have people in place who have no clue still about XR in general, who still don't know what immersive technologies are. And so what we're aiming for is talking to medical doctors and regulators who have never put a headset on and think that it's gaming. And if they see too good of a content, I mean, UX wise, they think, oh, it's too gamey, it cannot be medical. So actually, in their mindset, the content should look like crap still, you know, with no artistic direction whatsoever. And we shouldn't be using a headset. So we go back to the tablet, but the tablet doesn't offer the same amount of immersiveness, especially not for the mental health and well-being treatments we're seeking.
So folks, if anyone was listening to us to be like, we're very doom and gloom, right? And you know me, I'm a fairly optimistic person. I'm also a realist, and everything that we've said so far is valid. And what I mean by that is we can all pull out case studies, examples of companies that have put in augmented reality for remote worker, for see what I see, you know, phone a friend kind of stuff that works in their industry, in their use case. There are companies that are using VR or immersive training today, and it works within their process. Now, was it easy for them? Depends on who they are, what they are, where they're doing it, etc., etc. I can also come up with all sorts of examples in my world where they go, we had all the training, we were getting people localized and going out to an oil rig and cutting down on the time they'd have to be on offshore and the insurance company wouldn't accept the training, so insurance cert wasn't signed off, so we couldn't send them. Now, that's not AR, VR, XR technology's fault. That is regulation in that specific industry, in that specific geolocation, in that whatever. And then you get into politics and vested interests and yada yada. So those things exist. We can't ignore that. And in every single industry, you will find some, and we can't do this because of that. I know of utility companies that are out there and they can't use, I'm talking to JJ, do I cut the red line or the blue wire? I can't do that because we both have to be on a phone call with a printed out ring binder of what steps to do. And I go, I'm cutting the blue wire. Jay goes, cut the blue wire. We both tick the box on the ring binder, physical paper. That is the process. So all the, and look, you can get into the whole thing of, I wear gloves. Will we have hands free? You can talk to it. I'm on top of a wind farm in the North Sea. It's windy. That's not going to work. I can keep coming up with reasons why it won't work, right? And I can come up with plenty of reasons where it does work, and they're the low-hanging fruit. And the more people start using this technology in their personal lives with cheap, cheerful, low-friction devices, that's where we'll see this start pulled in. And then when we want to get a completely immersive experience for the guy on a wind turbine in a force 10 storm on the North Sea, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but that's a tiny piece of the market, right? Now, if I'm the guy on top of the wind turbine, that's important to me, but best of luck. That's like intrinsically safe devices. So I think then it's up to the medical industry to fix their problems. The AR/VR technologies, the metas aren't going to fix that. And it's the same for oil and gas. It's the same for industry.
But they're strongly advertising themselves as a device that could bring, that follows that trend. So if they don't, or if they cannot make the cut, that will mean less market share for them as well.
Oh, agreed. But if I may, pick any technology company bringing any headset. So it's their job to go change the insurance company's policies in oil and gas. They should.
Yep. I am with you. Go Meta, go for the lobby.
Okay, no, sorry. I strongly disagree. I absolutely disagree. Yes, we have a gazillion of super cool use cases that might have work. Majority of these things are just POCs, because mostly they are bound onto some kind of department lead that had some budget, and when he goes somewhere else, the project is done and dusted. This is the majority of the XR use cases in companies. Maybe there are a few that have implemented a specific XR use case. Let's say special forces are training in Omnidex, Cityfight, and so on and so on. Majority of the problems that we see, and it's the same with lobbying, people are deciding about future outcomes that have no fucking clue what they decide about. If it's politician, if it's some kind of bureaucrat somewhere, if it's any kind of health, yada yada, and so on. In addition, we have this domain chauvinism. Sometimes it's referred as not invented here. So if you come around from, let's say, healthcare, I had in automotive solutions from healthcare sector that would solve so many problems. But because it's healthcare, it's not the whole automotive, we are not adapting this. So this domain chauvinism or silo thinking that prevents any kind of improvement, together with this budget nonsense and this veto right bullshitters, mostly politicians, who do not know what they talk about. They just see a headline and then start talking about. This is the overall thing, this kind of corset that destroys everything. The only solution is really through human centricity. Means there is some guy climbing on some kind of chimney, whatever, and because he figured out that if he wears this pair of glasses and uploaded his own PDFs, he is more efficient. And if more and more colleagues are privately buying this nonsense and privately improving their own stuff, then packing it into some kind of how-to quick and dirty solution, then it will be adopted as a new standard. And this standardization is something where the Chinese, currently hated everywhere in the West, what they have understood. If you want to change something to your own advantage, go into standardization gremia and simply press into the game your own standards. This is what our own guys have not understood. So human centricity, the people that simply have to use it, that see a value in it, they will be the main drivers, and then it needs to be somehow legalized. More, let's say, societies where you have this strong, how to name it? In Germany, we would say Bestimmer, the one who simply dictates what you have to do. Like in China, they will simply say from tomorrow on, yes, from tomorrow on, my whole industry have to use this and that. And one thing that currently we in our extremely comfortable nest do not understand is that if I play the game by too much, let's say, making the life of others uncomfortable, it could come back like a boomerang very fast. We see this huge discussion, for example, around software in software-defined vehicles that we don't have, by the way, in the US. So if the US really wants to bring out that a Chinese car sold in the US has to run US software to be legal, then the European Union bureaucrats will simply follow this trend and say, if you want to sell your crap here in Europe, it needs to be European software. Then the Chinese will do this following. If you want to sell your Western shit in China, and it's a huge market, it needs to be Chinese software. And we increase the game. If you want to sell your XR devices and all of this other stuff, then it needs to run on Chinese software. And then we will see how we are circling around each other and try to beat each other.
We're back to human nature.
Yeah, exactly.
We can speak for the next 10 days on this and get nowhere, if I may. Two quick ones, Rory. You mentioned about virtual worlds and shared virtual experiences in the same place.
Yeah, there's two more points I wanted to bring up, but let's jump onto that. That'll be my one of two. So I'm interested in hear Letitia's point of view in terms of sort of entertainment, marketing, and events. But Kevin, please continue.
Well, just on the shared experience, right? So yes, we can all be remote. We can all be in a virtual world. I used to use a lot of Altspace. I found that very comfortable. I got used to it and I could use it. We're seeing there's more and more virtual worlds coming up. Some of them are having, some of the companies out there are having trouble because they're not being mass adopted, right? It's back to the thing. Some of them they're novelty. We do it once in a company, but we don't do it every day because it was a novelty and it's a bit friction and it's a bit hard and whatever. But it's not going away. I still need to see how say Microsoft build all that in with MS Teams and will we see that kind of crawl its way into standard practice over the next 12, 24 months. But the concept of having a room and we're all wearing some sort of a headset and some of them are 3D goggles with a big 3D immersive wall display, 3D monitors. There's more and more people, I've seen more people looking at that. And I'll tell you what plays into that as well is whether we like it or not, everyone's going back to the office. Right? That's a trend worldwide. There's more and more people in the same office. So suddenly I can have a collaborative room and I can, whether it's a 3D model in the middle of the room or some sort of a technology on the walls or whatever. Because you also have that human, it's a mixed reality, right? You have Jay is standing beside me and if I don't like him, I can hit him. as opposed to shouting at him from over the conference over a video call. But I do. You go around to events and you see more and more of these kind of immersive. Here's the digital twin of the oil refinery. We can look at it together, sit in the same room, and talk. Now, is that going to be? They're going to sell one to every company in the world? No, it's very niche. It's a very particular market. But I do think everybody going online into a virtual room today, technologies exist. Some of them are very good, but there's a lot of friction getting them work. So I don't see them suddenly becoming the standard anytime soon.
Yeah, just to add to Kevin's point around that, I think, one of the things that those environments do that I think is wonderful is that it takes all of the attention off of you being on camera, right? And that's huge. That's huge, right? I mean, how many of us are used to being in meeting upon meeting upon meeting every day where you're seeing yourself on camera, right? In those environments, you're engaging around a thing, like to Kevin's point, a digital twin or some content, or there's some reason that you're together with people and the focus is not on your face, it's on the things that you're actually working on. I think there's huge value in that. And once again, if we can get some of these virtual collaboration tools to start to use some of the standards that actually measure human behavior in those experiences and show how that potentially is quite different than being in a flat experience like we're in right now, I think we'd be in better shape. It's working with those to try to get them in a place where they are collecting the right data to be able to prove the ROI. But I think there's huge value in what they bring to the table.
Brilliant. And Letitia, I wanted to know your thoughts when it comes to fully virtual environments and sort of shared um, virtual rooms in terms of the festival and events and marketing. But just before you jump onto that, afterwards, I would like to hear, just to wrap up, I would like to hear people's thoughts on spatial collaboration without headsets. Kevin, something you've introduced me to in the past few months is spatial monitors. So I'd like to round up and finish on that note after Letitia, you do your points.
So Venice Immersive has been running for a few years now, this immersive world, the virtual world section, in partnership with VRChat. And since I'm not, VRChat and these platforms are all about communities. And so you feel like entering a bar that you don't belong to, or trying to go to a party you don't know anybody at. So it's really it's this odd feeling if you're trying to go on your own, because people there, they mingle. I mean, they are very active participants. And so during Venice Immersive, what is very interesting for people like me who don't use this as a regular Friday night alternative to going out, or during my daughter is asleep, I don't meet like people from the entire world, but I like to discover those worlds, and some of them are brilliant pieces of art, really. And that's what they're showcasing. They're showcasing a dozen or more worlds every year, and it always takes like 60 minutes, the time you onboard and visit a bit and exchange with the other participants. It takes a while, so you don't have that many slots available. And I every year try to get as many as possible, just to be guided. It feels like you have a tour of an exhibition, a private tour, just like when you're going to a museum and you have a docent helping you out throughout the museum and the exhibit. And so you learn more, you acquire knowledge about what to do, where to be curious, and how to really, be social, but social in a different way, because there are codes and there are manners that otherwise you wouldn't know if nobody tells you how to behave. Like the etiquette is very different than in regular life. So I really appreciate that, that setting. Plus, I always find wonderful settings. Like this year, there was this show, really, that was a performance. It was called Uncanny Alley. And on the other side, somewhere in the world, you had these two amazing actors, comedians, who were advancing the narrative. And you were following in this very puzzle detective story that was absolutely brilliant from an artistic directions perspective. And plus, you had these very good actors trying to encourage you and making you take the right decision and go where you needed and find out clues and go from one room to the other to the next step. And it was actually pretty incredible in terms of performance. And that's also like a little bit of a glimpse into the future of what could be performing arts, audiovisual, and immersion together. I thought that was brilliant.
Fantastic. And finally, I know we haven't got too much time left, but I'm interested, Kevin, if you can kick us off on this point, and then we'll get some final closing thoughts. We're talking a lot about the human-centric side of things and virtual collaboration on and off-site, remote and in person. What about 3D spatial monitors? It's very early days of that technology, but I've seen grow in the past year. I think there's an argument here to say that XR is far more expansive than the headsets we're using. It's also that data that we can use in various end devices that may emerge. Kevin, you brought spatial monitors to my attention first. What value do they bring? And perhaps on that point, what value does removing a headset bring to XR assets and working on or with said XR assets in enterprise or spatial assets or immersive assets, however which way you want to put it? Kevin, if you could kick us off and we'll wrap up.
So I've come across, and there have been 3D monitors, and people have been buying them and using them for a number of years. Technology's got much better. They typically work based on one person looking at a screen, because there's a camera in the screen tracking your eyes, and it does rendering so that it gives you a depth perception. I found them quite interesting. I suppose the thing I would say is when we talk about immersive experiences, there's a spectrum, right? It's everything from a call like this, where it's two-dimensional, a 3D monitor, so I'm looking at a 3D model and I get some depth perception. I can start using mixed reality. I get a whole different level of depth perception. I can use virtual reality, again, different immersive experience. And then there's combinations of all of them. I think there are some use cases. If I'm looking at engineering reviews, product design, spinning things around, whatever, a 3D monitor is an interesting way of getting a different level of immersive experience. Is it the right answer for everybody? No. I can only use it by one person, because if you put two people standing beside it, it confuses what eyes to look at. But it is very clever. I think the key thing is that regardless of the technology you're using to get that immersive experience, it all has to be coming from the one digital twin. If we end up I have a digital twin, now I have to create different versions of it because they all use different standards to render the model and whatever, we're doomed. So it's back to this, you get one version of your digital twin, and then how you consume that, 3D monitor, XR, VR, whatever, in-room experience, you're looking at the exact same thing at the same time with different people, and you can mix and match.
Fantastic. And any other closing thoughts on that sort of one digital twin aspect there, despite the end devices that it may be on?
So this is indeed a very interesting technology. I've seen several use cases, like, for example, at Mike Pell's Microsoft Garage, where he was as well experimenting with these monitors. It's interesting, really, if you are just this one responsible. But to circle back about these standards and so on, what I see that immersive or spatial will require is some kind of 3D backend, where it's interoperable and multimodal, where it doesn't matter if you watch it from your 3D monitor, from AR, from VR, and so on and so on, that you are more or less getting the necessary content out of this 3D backend on the device that you need to use for your specific use case. So running around, doing your checklist, if you need, let's say, some kind of 3D asset management, whatever, that you can even see it and flip it on your monitor, might be one use case. If we are talking about air traffic control, if you are sitting in front of your display, again, it's fine. If you have a group to train them on, then according or in addition to your 3D monitor, you would have as well, let's say, some people in a VR environment to see it from a different angle. So that you can, and the magic here is around this 3D backend simulation and replay what happened. This is something so valuable that currently the industry has not really fully understood. It's not just to show you the as-is condition right now in your digital twin. It's really that you can show them the history of it, and that you can even simulate how it might look like. So this really most valuable needs to be spoken out far louder, in my opinion.
And to Kevin's point, right, if we are utilizing the same standards in terms of how we're constructing those and even the data that comes out of it, right? As we're talking about simulation, and Jay's comment just now, you were talking about simulated environments and using environmental and or collaborative triggers to bring about a certain outcome, and then looking back at what was the trigger, what was the outcome associated with all of that. XAPI is a great open data standard for that, right? So it's, once again, it's really understanding the ways in which we work together, which comes up all the time in a theme in this conversation, right? It's the ecosystem and the power of the ecosystem, the ways in which we bring about the standards, and then hopefully articulate those in a way in which they get specified in industry so that we actually can advance the space forward.
If you talk to NVIDIA, OpenUSD is the standard. There are many, and I've 30 years in the IT industry. I have a personal opinion on standards. What's the standard? Whoever sells the most.
And just to wrap up, because I know everyone's leaving, Letitia, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I think that's a perfect time to wrap up. So thank you everyone for your time today. XR readers, tune into our social channels to read more. Thanks so much, everyone.